This conversation positions authenticity not as an aesthetic choice, but as a political and embodied act within global majority creative practices. It asks what it really means to make work that is honest, especially when the honesty challenges institutional expectations, disrupts stereotypes, and refuses to be easily packaged.
So I'm going to just talk you through my practice, which is a mixture of artwork, but it's actually for the last few years been a lot of research in community activism. So I'm going to talk you through some of the ideas that I've been working through. And the conversation we're having today isn't a new conversation. I wanted to start back in the 1920s, 100 years ago, when Du Bois talked about, when he was speaking to the Harlem Renaissance. I don't know if you know about the Harlem Renaissance. It was probably the big explosion of black art in America. And it was the first debate that black artists amongst themselves were having about what's our role in society with art. Du Bois, who's an American philosopher and artist, interjection into the debate was, if we want to make art, I will unashamedly say, I'm only doing art for communities and I'm only doing art for propaganda. And he was speaking in a way provocatively to artists to say, look, if we live in America, and this is at the high peak time of lynching, and we live in a world where we are not recognized as citizens, it's inevitable our art won't be recognized, and if our art isn't recognized, that means that white society isn't listening to us. So we have to make art to make white society listen, because unless you make white society listen, you don't change the world. So he's been provocative. One of the projects I'm working on at the moment in Nottingham, me and Jade both work in NG7, which is one of the poorer districts of Nottingham, a bit like Highfields here, I assume. And in 2018, a Caribbean guy called Errol Thomas starved in one of the blocks of flats near Primary. And it wasn't listened to. And this issue about listening is so important throughout the work. It's a constant theme I'm going to bring up. So we've taken over this building next door to the New Art Exchange in Nottingham, which is an old church, and we're trying to develop it into an anti-racist, human rights-led approach, which includes art-based activity. We're going to have communal meals downstairs and sports activities, and upstairs exhibitions, performances, and mentoring and coaching and other things going on. And we've developed that from a variety of different models, and I'm going to talk about some of them, but for me it was about Black Panthers. Nothing that we are saying today has been said before, and the Black Panthers is one example of the people who are doing it. The part of NG7 where we live was a hive of activity in the 80s. Keith Piper is speaking next. He lived in a block of flats near what is New Art Exchange, which is this area, painted by Paul Wappington, who set up the Nottingham Arts Lab. But that area of Nottingham had 50 organisations, community organisations, working together, including UKD, where the second Black Conference happened, Black Art Conference happened, working together with little resources. And someone this morning talked about the Art That Britain Ignores report, which came out 10 years ago. That listed hundreds of organisations where art activities were happening across the country, which are unrecognised. This area, Nottingham, had such a huge, and this is black and white organisations, all working class, working together. And the debate we need to have in between the race issue is also class, in a way. And they're working together, supporting each other. And a lot of these things is about communal working together in our communities, in a way. I then broke down those organisations into how close they are to formal institutions, or how close they are to grassroots organisations, or how close they are to art communities. And it just happens to be the fact that the ones closest to the institutions are the only ones that survive. All of the grassroots organisations have disappeared. in that area?
I remember all of the guest speakers that I had at art school in University of Derby, which is why I'm bringing it up, because I'm very Midlands through and through. When I went to University of Derby and did fine art, there were only white speakers, and I was told by the course leader and lecturer that they couldn't even point me towards black artists in Britain to help with my practice, to help with my education. And so I was frustrated that nothing was really tailored in terms of a kind of, let's not even talk about decolonial yet, or anti-colonial, because that's a different step, but just diverse arts education. So I said I had enough, and I said, I have two people I would like to invite, and I invited Marlene Smith, and I invited Vanny Burke, and that was the first time, I believe, in this course history that they had two relevant black contemporary practitioners talking about their practice. And I also asked this lecturer, do you even know who they are? No, he said, never heard of them. So for me, there's a fascination with responsibility, and with responsibility that we have to ourselves, responsibility that we have in terms of our arts education. And I'm bringing this up because that's my foundation. It is, I do the work that I do because I had a lack of, not because it was abundant for me. So my position, I come from a position of, not having access, not having, having a lack of, and also from the position of being a young person at the time. Was scary for me to go on a train and venture out into Birmingham. And I, at the time I was in Friar Park, which is in Wednesbury. It was a train and a bus away. And I remember, being a disabled, dyslexic, neurodivergent person, trying to go out in the world, and it was scary for me. So I also come from the position of disability justice. So I come from the position of intersectionality, of thinking about the ways in which different, the things that impact us in our civic life, they really steer our path. But from that moment I met Marlene, it kind of completely changed my life and my trajectory. I wouldn't be sitting here if I never spoke to her. I would have never really knew anything beyond the black country in Birmingham, in a way, artistically. So it's interesting when I think about this panel conversation, and the big important thing to me is about what is your community of practice, and how can you draw on that community of practice to think about empowerment, intellectual sovereignty, black internationalism, decolonial practice, anti-colonial practice, thinking about justice for yourself, justice for your peers, your colleagues, and your community. So it's like that's kind of where I'm at. And I think that, I will say that our art world is very siloed. I think it's regionally siloed. I think that it's siloed in terms of the intersections of it. So disability arts, for example, is completely white. I was one of the only few black people working in disability arts of recent. Even though Nena Kalu has won the Turner Prize, we're still not seeing that representation in our museums and institutions. Black disabled leaders who are women or non-binary do not exist in terms of their being in those positions, but they exist in terms of the practice they're doing in the grassroots, in their neighborhoods, in their places. And not just community work and social practice, but also exhibitions, because there's also a rhetoric that black folk don't make good art, that we only make art because it's about identity or representation. And that is absolute bollocks as well.